Artisanal brewery of Brussels. My name is Georgette. I will explain how we proceed to brew the best beer of Brussels in this little brewery. It was founded in 1900 by Paul Cantillon. Now the fourth generation is working here, and the year production is about 1,700 hectoliters, which is not much. You must know that in Belgium they produce each year nearly 20 million hectoliters of beer. And in that ocean of beer we brew, mind the verb, we brew 1,700 hectoliters. Men started brewing beer some 5,000 years ago. The first who did it were the Sumerians, and they lived in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is now called Iraq. And these people found out that if you put hot water on a mixture of grains and wait for a while, it finally brings you something good to drink. That's how they've been making beer all along our history. Work was done by nature, and that means very, very slowly. That's how they've made beer until 1870. Because at that time, a Frenchman called Louis Pasteur started with microbiology. Started working with industrial yeasts, with chemical stuff. And from then on they started brewing on industrial scale, which means that they paid more attention to quantity and forgot about quality, I should say. From that time on we have two big subdivisions in the beer world. On one end we have what we call beer with spontaneous fermentation, so the very old one we still do here. On the other end, you have the industrial beers. Industrial beers are subdivided in beers with bottom fermentation and beers with top fermentation. These three varieties of beer have something in common, and that's beer wort. Beer wort is the water taking the natural sugars out of the grains. This beer wort must in each case be cooked. And this beer wort will, where industrial beers are concerned, be cooled immediately after the cooking. How do they proceed? Well, with blowing machines and ice. Then they pump this cool stuff into stainless steel containers, throw in the yeasts, and there's never any contact with oxygen in industrial breweries. The air is the biggest enemy in industrial breweries. In our brewery, the air is the big ally, is our best friend. So, in industrial breweries, never contact with oxygen. They warm it up to 10 degrees Celsius. Not much happens in these containers. The yeast fall to the bottom. That's why we call it beer with bottom fermentation. That is known with the surname Pils beer. Pils beer, 5% of alcohol content. I do, of course, not know your training level on the consumption of alcoholic beverages, but
zero to high.
From zero to high, yeah, the scala. Well, and if you drink some of these beers sink to your knees and you start waddling.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, they go to your knees already. Only 5% of alcohol. Pils comes from Pilsen in Czechia, of course. Then we have what we call beer with top fermentation. What's the difference between a top fermentation and a bottom fermentation? Bottom fermentation and a top fermentation? Temperature. Exactly the same procedure, but at the end they warm it up to 20 degrees Celsius. Much more activity in these containers and the yeast go to the top of the liquid. That's why we call it beer with top fermentation. These beers are famous in Belgium with the surname Trappist beers. Does any one of you know how many Trappist beers are brewed in Belgium?
7.
Yeah, that's a bit, you're close to it. 6. 3 of them come from Wallonia. Wallonia is the southern part of our little country where they speak French as a mother tongue. And from there we have Chimay, Orval and Rochefort. From Flanders we have Westmalle, Westvleteren and Amont-Achel. The 7th you were thinking of is in Holland. That's close to Tilburg, La Trappe. Right. These beers are strong, ladies and gentlemen. 6, 8, 10, up to 12% of alcohol. That means that these beers immediately sink to your big toes and you are KO immediately. I think I know why these beers are so strong. That's because the monks who brew them may not eat during Lent, Lent being the 40 days period before Easter, and so they must have thought, aha, not eat. Well, then we'll brew ourselves a glass slice of bread, as we call it in Brussels. So, heavy beer to survive that difficult period. Then we have what we call Abbey beers. Does anyone know the difference between a Trappist beer and an Abbey beer? No? Abbey beers are brewed in breweries which have 10, 20 years ago, or even longer ago, belonged to cloisters and have now been overtaken by industrial breweries. Even if on the label there is a reference to religion, being a stained glass window, being a picture of a chapel, forget it. It's an 100% industrial beer. And these beers are famous in Belgium, are known in Belgium with the names Leffe, Maretsu, Grimbergen, again, heavy, dangerous stuff, up to 12%.
I'm going to need that list.
I beg your pardon.
I'll need that list so I can go and try each one.
Well, and in Belgium you must know that they produce about 1,000 different beers, and each beer has its own glass in Belgium. And now coming to our beer, the Gheude, the champagne of the beer. Why the champagne of the beer? Because just like champagne, it has a second spontaneous fermentation in the bottle. Big difference with champagne is the storing. Have a look, our bottles lay down horizontally. No one touches them, they stay there for 6 months. During that time, the second spontaneous fermentation in the bottle happens. What's this here? Creepy, no, I can't see anything. Could you please give me a bottle over there, but hold it horizontally?
Do you want one from the bottom or the top?
No, that's don't take.
You ever played Jenga? We like Jenga.
Thank you. Do you see this line?
Yeah.
This means that the second spontaneous fermentation in the bottle is going on for the time being. Have a look, there is a cork and a cap.
Yes.
And do you see
Where
is it? The gentleman on the cap?
Yes.
That's the beer king. You will see him later on, if you can't see him quite well. That's the beer king. That's King Gambrinus. Enjoy your life as he is there. You see, so this means that the second spontaneous fermentation is now going on. Thank you very much. So it remains there for 6 months. Why is there a cap on top of the cork? For 2 reasons. First reason is heat. We rarely have hot summers here. We've had 3 in the last century. 1947, 1976 and 2003. And in 47 they say that over 2 million bottles lost their contents in some hours' time after a thunderstorm. In order to avoid such a catastrophe, they decided to close them well, to put a lid on top of the cork. Second reason is exportation. We are small but very brave. We export to 15 countries in Europe, our best clients being Finland and Sweden. 30% of our production comes to the United States. Yeah. Each year we have more than 42,000 visitors coming from all over the world. People walking in from the south of Spain or from Washington, say, seeing how we make it, tasting it. I have a bar at home. Could you send me some cartons? Could you send me a palette? A palette is 105 cartons with 6 bottles on it, so big command. So in order to survive the long journey abroad, you must close the bottles well. Behind the door there you see the new bottling machine. The bottles come here, they clean them, lay them down, leave them there for 6 months. Then they put the labels on them in cartons with 6 on pallets for the big commands. But the biggest part of the production is sold here in the brewery. We're going that way now. If you are tall, you mind your head. It's not built for tall people here. Okay?